what we just want to ensure is we come out an open mind, and we're able to interact, rub minds, and at the end of the day, we're able to have meaningful insights on this. So, like I mentioned, we have created a fantastic lineup of speakers, from developmental experts to energy experts as well, to climate finance experts. Whatever the expertise you are looking for in the entire renewable energy space, our speakers can provide that. So at this juncture, allow me to introduce our first speaker. So typically it's going to go with presentations from different speakers. And then at the end of the day, we are going to open the floor to our wonderful participants to provide the questions they may need answers to. So I would really like us to listen in. And the first speaker we're going to be having, speaking on climate change, energy security, climate finance, and policies as a challenge for modern states in the 21st century. So our first speaker is no other person than Andrej Bojic. He is the Vice President for the United Nations Conference of the Parties, and he's a seasoned diplomat and climate energy expert with over 15 years of experience in the field of governance, diplomacy, climate, energy, communications, and international relations. His expertise in energy and climate, decarbonization, environmental policies, sustainable development, ESG, and project management is second to none. And he has held several positions, from being the vice president at COP25 to also being the head of cabinet of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Environmental Production of the Republic of Serbia. So I would like us to welcome our first speaker in the person of Mr. Andrej Bojic. Kindly give him the floor while he comes to speak on this topic. So Andrej, please, let's give a round of applause for him. Please, you can give a thumbs up, a hands up, whichever the case. Let's welcome him as he comes to speak on the stage. Okay, fantastic, fantastic. So over to you, Andrej.
Thank you so much for this nice introduction. And good afternoon to everyone. I would like to welcome you all here today. And at the beginning, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the organizers for choosing this very important topic of today's webinar. Also, I would like to thank them for the invitation to be part of this event. It is my real pleasure to share the floor with my dear and excellent colleagues, Paul and Daniel, and with all of you. As the first speaker and as the former diplomat, I would like to make a general overview of the topic, and I will try to contribute with my point of view. Also, I will try to open the door for very important facts about renewable and climate change, about which I am sure Paul and Daniel will give us more details. Here you can see the most important highlights from my story today, from climate change, energy security, to climate diplomacy and climate finance. But I will be completely honest with you today. I have devoted whole my life to the issue of diplomacy and to the issue of climate change. Actually, to the issue of climate negotiation and to the issue of mitigation and adaptation to climate change. Often, people think that this means simply giving up energy, construction, agriculture, and returning all to a pre-industrial time. But is this possible in the 21st century? Unfortunately, I am afraid it's not. On the other hand, many people today are minded to overemphasize the importance of climate change. Besides all of that, I'm trying all my life to find the necessary balance between all aspects of the issue of climate change and the necessary conditions for the development of states and society today. That's why I always point out that climate change is not the biggest challenge of the 21st century, but climate change is the biggest multiplier of all other challenges. Unfortunately, it is most visible on the soil of Africa, where people and countries face numerous challenges, some of which are not present in other parts of the world. I am primarily referring to climate migration issue, drinking water and food scarcity, floods, fires, etc. Quality of life, security, and unfortunately, survival is a common value of all countries in the 21st century, can no longer be separated from climate change, which seriously threatens these values. This issue became the main topic of that what we call climate diplomacy in nowadays. That is why I will start my presentation today with a reference to the issue of energy and security in order to point out the importance of energy in general for modern society. I always say that the energy and climate are two sides of the same coin. Energy propels and gives strength today. The development of any society and state cannot be imagined without energy. There is no doubt that survival and progress of any society depends on how easily energy can be obtained, respectively, on how much energy is available to it. It is no coincidence that in the past, the strength of the states was measured by the amount of energy the state consumes. Historically, technological development of society has also been measured by energy. While in the past it was considered that the countries that consumes more energy was more technologically advanced, today countries that satisfies their needs with less energy are considered more advanced. In line with that, we consider today as the most developed countries those which have the biggest share of renewables. So, economic development of states today cannot be separated from energy. It has long become a part of foreign policy and the subject of diplomacy. Energy fulfills modern international relations. National security strategies of states pay more and more attention to energy security and availability of energy sources. Today, the topic of energy security is at the top of the foreign policy priorities of the most states. The issue of energy security is gaining more and more importance, having in mind the fact that the world energy resources are limited and that the demand and consumption of energy increases in parallel with the growth of the world's population. For example, in the 1970s, the US consumed twice as much oil as the whole of Asia. In 2005, Asia overtook the USA for the first time. Certainly, this happened because of demographic growth and accelerated technological development of Asia states. Nonetheless, resources and their consumption are unevenly distributed. Today, the US and China alone consumes over 35 million barrels of oil per day, which represent more than 1/4 of the world's consumption. In parallel with this, the sector of renewables has seen tremendous development in recent years, but some colleagues agree that renewables still cannot compensate for the cessation of fossil energy. In this condition, the transition from fossil fuels to renewables is an expensive and technologically very uncertain process. It is necessary to replace the entire infrastructure network and the energy network of households and companies. But that doesn't mean that is an impossible process and that we should not go in that direction. We have to find a justly solution for development with less emissions of all pollutants into the air, water, and soil. That is why, in nowadays, we are all talking about the energy transition. For any change, and especially for those that are not so easy and simple as energy transition is, the most important achievement is the will to make the change happen. If we look at the goals set in the field of climate and energy at the highest political level, we can be free to conclude that there is a good political will for change in the field of energy and climate. All the results that have been achieved, as well as those that will be achieved, are a direct consequences of that. The readiness and openness of governments to cooperate with the leading companies in the world in the field of energy and climate, and international organization, as well as the readiness to use the experiences of other countries in these areas, is also an achievement that will give serious results in the future in the transformation towards a green economy. And further, this webinar today is a good example of what we call in diplomacy today the polylateral approach, where experts from all around the world, governmental and non-governmental international organizations, collaborate and exchange experience without the intervention of the governments. In order to achieve this, it's necessary to bring down the goals and results from the global and national level to the local levels and bring them closer to the citizens and companies. At the same time, a clear regulatory and financial framework must be created in which all actors will also have a direct financial benefit from the energy transition, not just a cost. So far, carbon markets seems to be the best possible framework for this. Also, introducing the ESG concept into the operations of companies and communities are another result that should be paid attention to. Success in this depends directly on the speed of earning new knowledge, developing new technologies, and their use. However, when we talk about the energy transition, I think it is important to underline that, as in any transition in general, we should always take into account that the transition creates losers and winners. We must be winners, not losers of energy transition. In order to minimize this, the state must have clear action plans for the sustainable energy transition. As I said, from the national to the local level, but from policy and finance level to the social level as well. The experiences of other countries can be especially useful here, primarily because the energy transition has many dimensions in areas where goals need to be achieved, from increasing energy efficiency to energy security of states. From the experience of EU member states and EU candidate states, in mitigation and adaptation to climate change, including development of renewables and new technologies, as well as achievements in energy transition, African states can adopt and apply a lot. For example, a voluntary initiative of mayors of European cities to create an agreement of mayors for sustainable energy and climate was created in the EU more than 15 years ago. Today, this initiative has become global, and more than 11,000 cities from all over the world have joined it. This agreement includes assistance in the development of local action plans for sustainable climate and energy, and we call it SECA, that prescribe clear measures and activities of cities in the energy transition. Today, we have full scientific, international, and national political agreement about all negative aspects of climate change. And now we are looking as humanity for energy sources which have less negative impact on climate change. The first address for that are certainly renewable energy sources, but also the energy efficiency as the other side of the same coin. But when we're talking about renewables, we should not forget that in addition to the potential in hydro, solar, and wind power, there is a great potential for all countries, especially for developing countries, with huge positive impact on climate mitigation in the area of energy generation from waste that has been created over the decades. For using this potential, we also need more facilities with new technologies for waste to energy, and even today we can use facilities and technology for waste to hydrogen. In accordance with that goal, cooperation with companies from abroad that can bring new knowledge and technologies is extremely important. With the technical and finance support from abroad, the plan to tackle the issue of climate change seems achievable. Let me conclude. The usage of renewables energy sources increase energy security because it brings extensive socio-economic benefits. Energy is at the heart of the climate challenge and key to the solution. The science is clear. To avoid the worst impacts of climate change, emissions need to be reduced by almost half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. To achieve this, we need to invest in alternative sources of energy that are clean, accessible, and sustainable. Renewables, which are available in abundance all around us, provided by the sun, wind, water, waste, and heat from the earth, are replenished by nature and emit little to no greenhouse gases or pollutants into the air. By the UN, here are 5 reasons why accelerating the transition to clean energy is the pathway to a healthy, livable planet today and for generations to come. Renewable energy sources are all around us. Renewable energy is cheaper. Renewable energy is healthier. Renewable energy creates jobs. And renewable energy makes economic sense. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you so much for your
Yes,
attention. I
thank
will
you so
really
much.
enjoy to have discussion with you with in your question. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrej. Thank you so much. We can fully resonate with your passion for this, and then we follow through your entire presentation, especially leveraging your expertise from your experience with the UN. And a major takeaway from what you mentioned was the clear need to invest in alternative sources of energy that are clean, renewable, and affordable. I'm quite sure some of us down the call are asking ourselves, why do I need to care about climate change? Why do I need to care about renewable energy? But that's the wrong perception, right? For those of us in Nigeria, you can also notice that there are minor distortions in the weather patterns. For example, the wet season, speaking from an agricultural standpoint, has been delayed. So we have had limited rain, for example. And of course, that's just one of the impacts that you see. And the question is, why will limited rain affect me? Well, tomorrow, perhaps when you go to get maybe your tuber of yam and you hear a tuber of yam is around maybe 100,000 naira, for example, I think you would want to ask yourself, oh, wow. So me burning or me cooking, for example, or the carbon footprints I'm creating from maybe driving, leads to excessive rainfall. Those are just questions you could ask yourself. And what you mentioned also around climate change being the biggest multiplier of all challenges in Africa is also something for us to ponder on. Because, like I mentioned, it's more of a domino effect. For example, you not recycling maybe the water you drink, for example, yeah, it gets dumped to the river gets blocked, and from the river being blocked, there's limited water flowing, and from limited water flowing, there are a series of actions that also take place. So, a major takeaway from what you mentioned, which I really appreciate, is for us to own this, for us to own the need for us to effectively ensure that we are able to not only provide adaptative as well as mitigation strategies as well to the ever-changing climate scope of the entire environment. So thank you so much for that, Andresh. And we are taking note of your questions. And at this juncture, I would like to welcome our next speaker in the person of Daniel Lux. He's going to be sharing his expertise on the topic about energy efficiency and CO2 capture use and storage, as well as biofuels. So Danielux is currently the CEO and co-founder of Cellus6. I hope I pronounced the company
It's a
properly.
very difficult name.
Of course, I
Deluxe,
tried.
yes.
I tried, and
Never
you
mind.
can see I tried as well. And Daniel is a seasoned climate expert with over 17 years of experience. I wonder what I was doing 17 years ago. Wow, over 17 years of experience making positive impacts on the world through technology and social responsibility. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of Cellus6, but I guess I would get it as often as I pronounce, where he leads the company's vision and growth in providing innovative and sustainable IoT and cloud solutions for various industries and applications. In addition to this, he is very active in climate change discussions, as you would witness today, writing articles and even books, as well as sharing impactful content on the effects of CO2 emissions in the world in general. So, Daniel, thank you so much for making our time for this, and I leave the floor to you now.
Thank you, Onyeka. Okay, hi, my name is Daniel, and thank you for the introduction. So I would say let's just jump straight in. So I'm looking here, we're looking at the IEA's mitigation map. And what, of course, the main subject of this talk is renewables. However, I think what you should maybe see is that actually efficiency stands for a larger portion of the reduction of the greenhouse emissions than the renewables alone. And unfortunately, efficiency is often overlooked, but the less energy we waste, the cheaper the green transition actually will be. So we have to make every kilowatt count, and I think that's an important part. Later on, I will be talking also about the fuel switching, and there I namely talk about biofuels and carbon capture and use, which are two other main factors to actually help the mitigation. The only thing I'm not going to talk quite that much about is actually wind, solar, and hydro. So I hope someone else will probably talk about that, and it's also a much more known subject. So let's jump straight to energy efficiency. This is a picture of the US energy waste from mainly electricity generation, but also from transportation. So what you see here, the important figure is the rejected energy. Rejected energy is basically energy waste, something you don't use for any usable or valuable purpose. The main part of this rejected energy comes from the fact that most of the electricity generation or the transport comes from internal combustion engines or from burning fuels. And you don't use the heat, but the heat is actually a major part of the energy being used. And that results in this 55.6% in 2011 in the US. Now, the worst thing, I think, is that when we go 10 years ahead to 2021, then you see that the rejected energy in the US actually has increased by 10%. That means the US has become even worse at using the energy at their disposal. If you follow some of these wind, for example, if they had split them out, or hydro or nuclear, or solar especially, what you actually would see is that the loss from this type of energy sources is much less because they do not imply the thermodynamic process. Also, if you had here using transportation, the electric vehicles, then the efficiency of an electric vehicle is much, much higher than the efficiency of an internal combustion engine. That means going towards electrification of things is a good thing because we will reduce a huge amount of this wasted energy. And the more energy we can not waste but use for the purpose it was produced for, the better it will be for all of us and the cheaper the green transition will be. So in Europe, and especially in Denmark, we have a lot of wind and solar in Norway and Sweden. We also have hydro, but Denmark is mainly wind and solar. And since you know, the wind blows when it wants to, so it doesn't always blow. A wind turbine has typically an efficiency of about 28%. When you look at solar panels in Denmark, then they have an efficiency of about 11 to 12%, because it's night, they will not produce electricity, or if it is the winter in Denmark, they will not produce any electricity. This results in very much fluctuating supply. So Denmark has a target of five-folding the supply until 2030 of renewable energy. At the same time, because of the electrification of the demand side, with electric vehicles, with heat pumps and wall boxes, you see that the demand will also increase for electricity. Some of the things which are now used for heating or cooling will go over into electricity and no longer be burning fuel or wood or whatever. This results in highly fluctuating prices, which at some points even can be zero or negative, and at other points really, really high. That means in order to balance the demand side with the consumer side, we need to integrate the large consumers, and we need to do it in all types of buildings which you have in a country. So, and you need all the parts of the energy ecosystem. So, and of course, you will start with the biggest ones, the EV charger, the car, the battery storage, the heat pump, the inverter, the solar panels, the main meter, and then sometimes you want to do peak shaving or grid balancing. For example, if there's a surplus of power, why not charge the car, maybe almost cheap? Or if you can preheat or pre-cool a building, this is more efficient than if you cool it after it has been heated up too much. So you can actually both save and you can stabilize the grid if you also start controlling the demand side. And for that, you need basically a digital main meter, and you need high resolution data, preferably even real-time data to do this. And you need an electricity market so that the consumers can actually benefit from the lower prices, and that as long as you're in the safe operation mode for your grid, it's the price level that will stabilize the grid, and it's not necessarily the electrical company, the DSO, who is controlling the demand side. At least in Europe, that is not a go. So what we do is, what you basically need to do is on the right side here, you have the market. So either you want to sell, you want to store, or you want to use your energy. On the other side, you have the production side of the energy. So is the wind blowing? Is the solar? Is the hydro? I mean, at some points, not last year, but the year before, there was no hydro in Sweden and Norway, and they had really high prices. This regulates the price, the demand, and the supply side. And based on that, you can then make decisions for your house. Maybe you have a party tomorrow, so you want it nice and cool, I would think, in Nigeria. Or maybe you don't care, but you have to drive far, so you would like to charge your car. But you will need to make the decision, and you will need to make the decision of what you're willing to pay. One example is what we, for example, do is you need to charge your car. The car needs to be ready by, let's say, 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning. Then why not choose, instead of when you come home at 1700 in the afternoon, you would plug it in. Normally it would start charging. But you might as well just wait until later in the night, and then you get a much cheaper charging, and thereby you can actually also save money while you also actually help the grid, because the cheapest energy in Denmark is the green energy. So it's wind and solar. That means you save, but you also use the cleanest energy, which emits least CO2. So it's a really good win-win situation. We also have some tools for children, because the problem is you need to educate the population in order to do this green transition. If no one cares about electricity, then the future generation will also not care. And we need to get it in the heads that this is actually, it matters. If you waste energy, it matters. It makes it more expensive for everyone. So what we made was a treasure hunt for children. So they find how much does each appliance use. Then we teach them about standby consumption. We call them energy vampires. And then we go towards calculating, if you kill the energy vampire, how many ice cream can you actually earn, because you now don't waste your energy on the standby consumption. So these plugs are both used in the industry, but they are also used in schools. And they have a real meter. They have a 16 amps a relay, and then they can change color. And one of the things which is also very popular with our customers is that we can change the color. So it's green the 8 cheapest hours of the day for the electricity, yellow in the next 8 hours, and red in the 8 most expensive hours. So then you have a very easy way to see, am I currently in the expensive time or in the cheap time, which you need to give the consumers easy ways to understand that the price is fluctuating, and you need to give them easy tools to understand which devices use a lot or a little electricity. Let's go to the next subject. So CO2 capture, use, and storage, and biofuels. Again, I came from here where we said, okay, fuel switching is actually 8% of the reduction needed. And the carbon capture and use should be doing 9%. So now let's see what is actually on with this carbon capture. If we look through the last 800,000 years, then the CO2 level has always been between 180 and 280 parts per million. So that's 0.028 or 0.018%. And right now we are at 0.04. That's not really a big amount, right? The driver for these fluctuations was mainly actually the wobbling of the Earth around the sun. It's like a spinning top, and it has a certain precession with a period of 26,000 years, obliquity where the angle changes with a period of 41,000 years, and a changing eccentricity with a period of about 100 to 400,000. And when they then hit on top of each other, that will cause cooler or warmer times on Earth, and the temperature actually also has an influence on the CO2. So I said it, our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen. Then we have some oxygen, 22%, argon, 1%, and then the 0.04% of CO2. Why does that matter? It's really nothing, right? Anyhow, what we're looking at is the projection is that we might actually end on 1200 by the year 2100. But we might also actually end even higher in the year 2300. We might be at 2000. So you could say that in a way we are busy doing an geoengineering of our Earth. Now, in the past, geoengineering has not always worked very well. What I'm showing here is actually a hurricane. And this was one of the first tries by the Americans to control this hurricane. And they injected the hurricane with CO2, actually frozen CO2, which makes it rain. And just after they injected it, it actually turned and killed about 6 people. So that means we are doing some geoengineering we don't know the effect of. And now we want to do more geoengineering that we most likely cannot foresee the effect of in the future. But there's also another thing why maybe the geoengineering and only focusing on the temperature is not enough. There is some research where we have people have tested the cognitive capability of us humans with respect to different concentrations of CO2. And actually what you can see here in the strategic thinking, the ability decreases very heavily with increasing CO2. Now remember, in 2100, the outdoor air may have 1200 parts per million. That means our strategic thinking will have dropped by 35%. Or in other words, our intelligence might be diminishing if the CO2 comes so high. You maybe already know it today. You're inside a building, there's high CO2 level, and you get a headache, and you get tired, and you cannot focus. That is the effect we're talking about, but that's the effect how it is in the fresh air outdoors. That means we need to move towards a circular and regenerative way of running our Earth. The Earth was in a balance for a long time, the 800,000 years, and the nature actually absorbs a bit by bit the CO2, and volcanoes, they can also emit CO2, but it was in somewhat a balance. But these time frames are measured in thousands of years and not in 1 year or 2 years. So we need a circle which basically is always in balance. And unfortunately, right now, the math models, they take, for example, how much methane is heating with respect to to CO2, it's taken over a 100-year period. However, CO2 will take 2,000 to 3,000 years of being removed from the atmosphere, where methane is typically removed within 10 to 15 years. So the methane is overestimated and the CO2 is underestimated. Now we go to biofuel. So this is a picture on the right from the Baltic Sea. And this green stuff, this is algae. So algae, actually, they grow at an exponential rate. There are some algae which double in biomass every 12 hours if they have the perfect conditions. Now, the Baltic Sea is almost dead. And why is that? It's because there's so much nitrates from the surrounding countries, from the agricultural side, that the algae are growing, no one is harvesting them, then they stop growing and then they die. So when the algae actually are dying, what they do is they emit all the CO2 they have absorbed before and put it in the water, and it stays in the water. But fish also need oxygen to breathe, but the pH changes and the oxygen disappears, and the result is that the Baltic Sea is dying. But what can we use microalgae for? Actually, we could use it for almost everything that we use fossil fuels for today. We can make food out of them. We can make biogas. We can make fertilizers. We can make plastics. We can make all kinds of things. They can even be used to clean the water. In Denmark, actually, most water treatment plants use algae, and they are not using energy, but they are actually producing energy because the microalgae are harvested and then burned, and then you actually generate energy. Plus the process of heating or treating the water generates heat, which again can be used. So if you look at it in the overall picture, then this is a great possibility to actually have a regenerative and cyclic way of generating useful raw materials. Another project which I really find very, very interesting is the seawater greenhouse. These people, they take seawater, they do some desalination, and then they let the seawater evaporate over some walls so that you get a high humidity in the air inside of these greenhouses. At night, the temperature typically falls, so it condenses and it rains inside. And the surplus water is then irrigated around these greenhouses, thereby actually being able to take a desert and re-greening this desert, which will also, of course, reduce the heat in this area. And this opens again also the possibility of making very arid areas again livable and useful. Another concept which I find very interesting is eco-village. And the idea is that you grow your own food, you trade in between the village, and the village should be as its own fully sustainable. And if you do it in the right way with the right plants, it also reduces the temperature in the eco-village. And I've visited some eco-villages, and some of them had actually enough surplus to be trading their surplus with the economy around them. So I have a lot of this stuff, especially with the CO2, how the history of the Earth, how the CO2 actually 3.5 billion years ago, the Earth was very much like Mars or like Venus, almost only CO2. And then these organisms, microorganisms, they terraformed our Earth. And right now we are terraforming the Earth for something else, because CO2 has always been fluctuating, but it's probably not optimal for humans to live on that Earth of the future. So maybe we should do a bit more about that. That's what my book is about. And as last takeaways, I would say, let's try to waste less. Energy efficiency reduces the cost of the green transition. Let's try to use green solutions because they can be circular, they can maybe even be regenerative, and focus on local value creation, because actually Africa has a lot of possibilities. I mean, there is more sun, there is also a lot of energy in the climate, and there is also a lot of labor. So there must be possibilities. And I think the value creation, if you increase the part of the value creation to maximize that at the local level, then you have also goods to export to other countries, and they will be worth much more than just the raw materials like minerals. And yeah, and I think that was my 20 minutes.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much. And one major takeaway we can get from this is we know that Daniel is well informed, and I'm quite sure some of the jargons that are being used here, some of us were trying to Google up as he was mentioning them. But be rest assured, I told him to take it easy on some of us here, because like I mentioned, this is not a really high level engagement. But of course, we are trying to curate different participants in the entire ecosystem, and we are trying to, provide information to them as well. So thank you very much. A major key takeaway we can get from, his presentation was on how we can capture CO2, where a spotlight was being put on eco villages as well as seawater greenhouses. The idea of eco villages sounds quite interesting, and I'm quite sure we have some of those activities here in Nigeria, and it also aligns with the nexus we have for the agricultural space as well as the renewable energy space as well, which makes a lot of sense. So please keep your questions coming in. Like I mentioned, the speakers are here to provide whatever insights you may need on renewable energy, on climate change, on policy advocacy around all these themes and thereabouts. So keep the questions coming in, and we can see our next speaker is already ready, thrilled to provide insights to us as well. Thank you so much, Daniel, for this wonderful presentation. And of course, we'll be swinging the questions by after our last speaker has his presentation. So at this juncture, allow me to introduce Paul Webb, our next speaker. Paul is currently the founder of B2B Energy. He is an esteemed energy expert and a thought leader on renewable energy and climate change. He's an accomplished podcaster. Be rest assured, we'll be sharing links to all the extensive materials he has been able to provide on this thematic area. He's also a YouTuber. He's a recognized influencer across all social media channels. He is based in the UK and Thailand and has significantly contributed to the field of energy management through his innovative platform, B2B Energy. And I'm quite sure we are looking forward to get his insights on this. And at this juncture, I would like Paul to kindly take on the stage and, let's have your presentation. Over to you, Paul.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this invitation. I feel very honored that I've been invited today, and well done to the previous speakers. And it's amazing what the knowledge share that has been gathered already today, and I hope that people can take some more information and knowledge away from my presentation today. So thank you again for this honor. It's always an honor to be presenting in Africa. So just to confirm, you can hear me okay and you can see my presentation, yeah?
100%. We can hear you clearly and we can also see you as well.
Lovely. Okay, so thank you very much for the honor of this. And I'd like to just say that my focus today, and thank you, Daniel, because he actually mentioned that energy efficiency contributes 37%, which is a significant value to the risk to climate change. And for me, I've been in this industry for 43 years. And for me, this is where, energy efficiency can make a massive difference to actually kickstart the process. I'm a great believer in the journey of energy management, as I will go through. So my topic for my presentation is energy management is a journey from reviewing energy management needs for organizations to actually deploying a renewable strategy, whether the renewable strategy is as part of the building or whether it's part of, you know, the whole country's requirement. Okay. So just to give you some background to myself, it was mentioned that I'm very sort of a big contributor to social media, and those 43 years of my experience, I want to give back to people around, you know, around this call today, people around the world. And since 2019, I've been endeavoring to contribute to that, to transfer my knowledge of those 43 years, from working in a nuclear power station to working for the Met Police as an energy officer, to working for various controls organizations. So I've got a whole raft of knowledge and experience that I want to share back to you as an individual. So I have a website. This is my website where you can go and get more information about what I'm doing and my knowledge and articles I've written. I have a podcast. I've got about 140 episodes where I interview experts, and I'll be speaking to the likes of Danielle and Andre to see if I can get them on my podcast to share that knowledge even further. So I'm managing to gather more and more experts to share knowledge, because I think that's important. Collaboration is very important for our task ahead and that the risks that we've got to achieve. I'm also posting on a regular basis on LinkedIn, and I think that's an important platform for us. That's where I found this invitation for today's seminar. And obviously, all of this is multiplied in the likes of YouTube, etc. I am a sort of written quite a few books. I've written 8 books on the subject of energy management, and one book that I'm very proud of, and again, Daniel alluded to it, is a children's book. And I think that's where it all begins. Sustainability begins with our families and our children, because it's about us passing that knowledge on to them so that they can make a difference. And I personally would like to leave this planet the way I arrived to it. You know, I don't want to leave it in a worse shape. And this is what sustainability for me is all about. So when we look at energy management and renewables, it's a big balance. Do we look at doing the renewables first, or do we look at doing energy management? It's a balance of what we attack. And many organizations come to me and say, I want to put solar on my roof, I want to do renewables. And I have to say, look, let's take a step back. Energy management's a journey. Let's not dive straight in. And I'm going to show you a case study where we didn't dive in, and we've done it by step, and you'll be amazed at what we did achieve. So it is a race, energy management or renewables. But for me, in the industry of energy efficiency and energy management, I honestly believe that is where we need to start first. Now, when we look at energy management in an organization, if you was to split that down into two, 50% of an energy within an organization is waste, and the other 50% is efficient use. We know by sheer experience and knowledge that an organization is possibly wasting 50% of their energy, you know, leaving lights on, running systems when they shouldn't be running, looking at incorrect set points on their BMS system or their air conditioning systems, running systems when they shouldn't do, basically. Now, if we take that over and understand and break that down, that 50% can be contributed to 25% of that could be the technical opportunities. So yes, putting the solar on, putting technologies in place to actually drive the energy down. But then the other 25% of that 50% is actually behavior. It's all about the people. And they're the very simple things. So I believe that the starting of the journey is for us to focus on the behavior change and really looking at the way we operate buildings and the way we operate our organization. So the drivers all behind this are economic. So there's an economic drive regarding the cost of all this, you know, saving kilowatt hours, which is what we're talking about, is actually a cost benefit. Sometimes we have to spend to save, but normally the paybacks align themselves whereby we're going to make significant savings. There's obviously an environmental benefit, which we've already seen today, that by applying energy efficiencies, we can deliver good benefits for the environment. And now what we're finding is that we've got regulatory compliance and legislation. In the UK, we have significant compliance around, major organizations. They have to deliver certain amount of savings on their consumptions. They have to carry out assessments. And what we're finding, the closer we get to 2050, the compliance and legislation is driving harder and more firmer. So we will see that in a way, organizations would have no choice, but they get the benefits from that. But the choice for them to make these decisions regarding energy efficiency is going to be less. So what is energy management and energy efficiency? Well, the key objectives around this is for us to reduce energy consumption, gas, electricity, and I always include water into that, because we're having to pump water, we're having to possibly heat water or cool water. So there's energy efficiencies around water as well. Now, this provides an improved efficiency, lowers the cost, and it minimizes the environmental impact. So that is the basis of what is energy efficiency. Now, I'm going to focus on an organization regarding that, because that's where it all starts. So there are various success stories that I've worked with and that other organizations regarding how we've successfully managed energy. And there's lots of lessons that can be learned around that. And there's key takeaways and there's best practices that we can pull off just these simple case studies. And when we look at the energy management process, it's very, very simple, basically. We have principles. And then principles, first of all, and this is what I train and mentor on, is that we need to review, realign, reduce, and report on our energy. And those first 4 principles need a process. And the process to deliver those principles is here, is the energy management process of a meeting, a plan, reviewing data, carrying out an assessment, looking at the measures and proposals, developing action plans, and then implementation. And then all of this always have a conclusion, which is reduced consumption, reduced cost, and reduced carbon. It all aligns. Now, I've started calling all this the art of energy management. As I've been growing up in this industry, what I've been finding, it's been very hard to articulate and sort of explain what energy management and efficiencies is all about. But I'm finding now, as we're getting closer to these deadlines and energy efficiency is becoming more important, it's very good for us to articulate energy management in this format. So this is why I've developed this format, because it helps organizations understand, because it's about education as well. So I'm going to talk to you about a case study that I've been working on. And this goes back to 2016 when I was engaged with the London Stadium. And you may remember this stadium was the Olympic Stadium in 2012. And originally the plans was for the stadium was to be dismantled, possibly moved to another area. But a famous MP for the UK government decided that we was going to have a legacy of the Olympic Park, and we was going to keep the Olympic Park where it was and grow and develop it for the future of sport and for commerce within the UK. The decisions were made to turn this stadium into a Premiership football club back in 2015, and in 2016 it actually took off and become a Premiership football club. It's actually owned by the government, but we had all sorts of challenges because we had many stakeholders, and also this building wasn't designed to stay there, so it had no legacy itself. So we had to build legacy into that. And as you can see from these graphs and this of the energy, significant amounts of energy was being utilized there. And if you look at at 2020, I'm sure if I was to ask anyone to tell me why did the energy drop then, well, we all know that was when we was in a pandemic and we had COVID, and that drove energy down because the facility couldn't be used at that time. So you can see, that raised a very big question to all of us. Well, if we can get the energy down to that level, then why can't we do that throughout the periods? So that really was one of our biggest triggers. I talked to you about the principles. Well, this is exactly what we did. We reviewed, we realigned, we reduced, and we reported on that. And I'm going to break that down for you to show you exactly what we did. So first of all, the review. This is what we carried out. So we carried out energy assessments night and day. We put together a review on all the data on the metering, heating, the heat meters, the water meters, the gas, and also the electricity metering, and started reviewing all that data. We started having monthly meetings led by the owners of the property, and all parties and all stakeholders attended that. So we brought in collaboration, and then we started to review all our billing and started to understand how we was being billed for that energy as well, because there's no point us controlling the cost and not the consumption. Those two things have to be brought together in line with each other. We then looked to realign. So we realigned the behavior within the stadium regarding the switching off of systems. And that's the simplistic approach. But a lot of the systems were being left on during non-event modes, because we have many, many events. We have concerts, footballs, matches, baseball. It's a multi-tasked stadium. And, starting up from an event and then closing down the event was focused on, and also the building management systems and all the things that we could approach. So we started aligning them very quickly, and they're sort of the low cost and possibly zero cost. There's no cost to implement a lot of this work. So if we looked at a timeline in this graph, in 2016 to 2021, this is where we was achieving year-on-year savings, very small savings, but we was taking gradual steps, focusing on people and focusing on the operational hours. And in 2021, we've now started we've implemented projects. So FOP stands for field of play. That is the floodlights. The floodlights have been converted to LEDs, and then we've put LEDs in for the whole of the stadium. Significant amount of investment has been put on place within the stadium. We then come to report. Now, the reporting levels in the beginning wasn't very good, and we've had to work on those to drive those. So these reports, this report here, the orange report, shows the energy consumption from 2016, and you can see the trend of it going down. And this report here is a daily report. So every member of the stakeholder received this report, and we can understand how well we're doing on a daily basis. We report on that. And that's important to keep the daily focus on this. Energy has become very high level within the board. And I haven't mentioned this, but energy is normally your third largest expense after people and after your property. So why not focus on it? Why not put some time and attention into that? We then sort of focus on implementation. So field of play, as I mentioned, was converted to LEDs. We actually done a full LED conversion on all the LEDs within the building. Daily reporting, kilowatt hours, carbon footprint reporting has been carried out, and then BMS upgrades and strategies. We've done small areas on the small power. So we've installed smart sockets so we can shut off a lot of the low usage and the base load. So the base load is starting to drive down. We're even turning fridges off. So very simple, driving the efficiencies down through small, turning off small power as well as the large stuff. So when I talk about my journey, if you remember, I said that we need to focus on the energy efficiencies first before we start to look at the renewables. And that's exactly what we've done here. So now this is about to start. We're waiting for the start date of this, but it's all been approved, all been signed off for a £4 million solar project to put solar around the stadium. Now, originally, if we was to look at the solar and the sizing of that from day one, that would have been a significant cost, and a significant amount of solar would have gone on the roof to actually drive that down. But because we've now got a smaller target to go at, the cost has gone down and the size of the solar has gone down. So originally in 2016, we would have had to put a 1.4 gigabyte solar system on there, but now we can just put a 1 gig. So you can see scale, and the scale of things would have actually, scale of economies would have brought those costs down as well. So the organization, not only have they reduced their energy and their cost, but they're going to reduce their future investment costs going forward, because they don't really need it, because they've smartly done this. If they had done it round the other way, we would have had a very big solar system wasted, okay? And sustainability wise, that wouldn't have addressed any of the issues, because we would have then been exporting. So as an overview here, what this energy efficiency journey does for us, it helps us regarding planning. And it you know, if we start planning this, it's crucial, and it's a critical part of the steps. We also are able to set goals here. So setting goals and objectives, smart goals and objectives that are achievable and realistic. We also have developing the strategies to achieve those targets, and allocating resources. When we're working together as a collaboration, we can actually collaborate well to actually get all this together, okay? And all these people can work together to address that. And it's all coordinated within a team. So it's a team effort going forward. And this team effort will win together. And we talked about that earlier, about the winners and the losers. These are all winners. So to conclude my presentation today, I just wanted to pick up on these main points. So prioritizing energy management provides a critical foundation for the sustainable adoption of renewable energy technologies going forward. It ensures that investment in renewables are both effective and economic. Organizations look to embrace sustainability should first focus on optimizing their current energy practices before scaling up their renewable energy solutions. So it needs to be a journey, as I mentioned before. And the net effect of all of this is reduced cost on renewables. And that is really where I believe this process needs to follow. Now, obviously, to find out more about what I'm talking about here and to share this is my LinkedIn. As I say, I talk a lot about energy management and renewables. Please feel free to reach out to me and follow me. I provide a lot of free content to people, and I talk to people a lot about their journey within this marketplace and what they're trying to do within the industry. So please, I'll be happy to communicate with you in the future. So once again, thank you very much for your time and your participation in today's presentation. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that. Thank you so much for that detailed presentation. It was really insightful, and a major spotlight of your presentation was when you gave a clear case of the projects which you worked on, especially the stadium, which is currently being used by a Premier League club. I'm glad you didn't mention the club, because some of us have diverse views on that. So, and some of us are also Premier League fans. So if you had mentioned a particular club, some of us may have certain sentiments. So thank you for withholding the name of the club. And from your look, I think I can guess the club, but I believe we'll have that discussion after this webinar. So just like Paul and other speakers rightly mentioned, they are quite open and quite vocal about speaking on these thematic areas. And to that effect, we'll be putting their LinkedIn, the address of their LinkedIn pages on the chat box, so you can quickly go and connect with them on LinkedIn, share insights, and whatnot. So we have just put that on the chat box up on LinkedIn. And at this juncture, would like to take the questions. We had a lot of questions, but in view of time, we'll keep them quite limited and we'll keep them quite specific to a particular speaker. So the first question we have is for Andrej. Andrej, kindly avail yourself so we can ask you a question. And the question is from Masood Idris. The question goes as follows. How can developing countries, especially African nations, integrate hydrogen value chain into their conventional energy they have today? So he wants to understand how developing countries like African nations can integrate the hydrogen value chain into the conventional energy they have today. So kindly respond to that, Andres, briefly, around about a minute or two, and then we have the other questions for the next speaker.
Thank you so much for your question, Masood. It's not so easy and simple to give a brief answer of that, but I will try to do that. From my perspective, the best way for countries that are in the group of developing countries is to make an effort, additional effort, and to skip some experiences of developed countries. And if they have the possibility, immediately to focus on the most advanced technologies, such as technology for the production of hydrogen from waste. Developing countries can make added value to energy production if renewables used for production of hydrogen. Step by step, that will change the whole framework for using the energy. I hope that I give you bullets of future thinking about the production of hydrogen in developing countries, but this is really not so easy to do in couple of sentences. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And just like we rightly mentioned, expect some questions via LinkedIn. So even if you don't throw so much light on it, there will be room for further discussions after this. And just like I mentioned earlier on, this is more of a precursor to our events coming up, where I'm quite sure we're going to be having not just this lineup of speakers, but also global lineup of speakers as well that are going to be participating in that. So I'll take the next question, and the next question is for Daniel. And the question goes as follows. So considering Africa's extensive use of internal combustion engines, what would you advise as the best approach for making electric vehicles mainstream in Nigeria, in Africa, in particular to Nigeria? So considering the extensive use of ICEs rather, what would you advise as it would be the best approach to ensure that electric vehicles are mainstream in Nigeria? So just a minute for you to respond, a minute or two for you to respond to the questions, and we'll take the next one.
I would think that we can take a lesson learned from what happened in Europe, that in order for electric vehicles to be successful, you need an extensive network of charging stations. Because after all, it's transport, you need to be able to charge everywhere. Now, you don't have to go the way of fuel stations, but it could also be a distributed network of homes that offer a system to where you can just park your car while the person is maybe working another place. So you have a system of a lot of charging stations. I think it's not like the egg and the hen. In this case, I would say you need the charging stations first, and then the rest will most likely follow. And then renewable energy is often the cheapest. Solar is cheap in your country, or should be very good. So that should be maybe. But Paul maybe has another point on that.
Of course. So you saying solar is cheap, I wanted to also ask you if I can maybe get the solar from yourself. But it's okay. Thank you so much for that. And just like you rightly mentioned, right? All of us admire Tesla from afar. When we are possibly in our social media handles, we see Tesla. We see how EVs are mainstream in other countries. And what we don't really think of, especially from the infrastructural standpoint, is on the charging stations. Because where do you charge? Just like where we have filling stations scattered around. And how do you charge your electric vehicle when your battery is drained, right? So like you rightly mentioned, the first call to action would be for charging stations to be available, and thereafter others can follow. Thank you so much for that response. And the next question goes to Paul. So the question that was asked was, how can companies position themselves to adopt more energy efficient production processes so as to capture and reduce CO2 emissions? So they want to understand, based off your experience as well, how can companies position themselves so that their production processes are more energy efficient and can capture or reduce CO2 emissions? So please kindly respond in a minute or two, please.
Thank you. I go back to my 4 principles really, and the first thing all organizations need to do, and they don't, and that is to review. So they need to understand how much consumption they're using within the buildings and the process, and it needs to be broken out. So they need to start to review their energy bills, maybe their metering, to understand what is being used. We cannot manage what we don't measure. That's the key factor here. So organizations need to go back, understand how much they're using, and then they need to then make decisions on that. So it could be that their buildings are only 10% of their process. If they break that out and understand that, then, process is quite a hard one to break down regarding energy management. You need to have more intelligence around what's happening in the process. The buildings is a lot more easier, but when you've got a process and a building, it's harder because the building element of it is smaller. So it's going back to the beginning, start reviewing their data first and reporting.
Of course.
And maybe
just like
working, right? And maybe working with their peers, their competitors, understand what they're doing. I talk about collaboration in all of this. We all need to get together and work together and understand what's happening out there.
Of course. Thank you so much for that response. And I'm quite sure that question has been, answered properly. And another question goes to Andres. Andres, they had a lot of questions for you, but like I mentioned, we had to streamline the questions for, in review of the time we have. So the question goes as follows, and the question is from Emmanuel Idio. What are those organizations or non-governmental organizations, right, that can provide continuous advocacy in order to stimulate the political will of our governments, especially in developing African countries? So it's trying to ask, what are the organizations, NGOs or bodies, what have they provided for continuous advocacy in order to stimulate the political will of governments, especially in developing countries? So kindly speak to this, please.
Thank you so much for this question. Again, from my experience, African countries are very active during climate negotiations under the auspice of the UNFCCC. Also, African countries often give a special impulse to climate actions and move all of us further in negotiations. On the other side, large part of the programs of the World Bank and especially United Nations agencies such as UNEP or UNDP are implemented in Africa. All this leads to the strengthening of political will in African countries and abroad. Personally, I think it is important that there are also influential organizations at the local and national maybe on regional levels in African countries. But for me, from my experience, the most influential organization is need on the local levels. African Union can be an excellent framework for this if they can succeed to move down political framework and political guidelines for organization on national and local level. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Andresh. I believe you responded accordingly to the questions. And I'm going to take our final question before we call it a day. And this question goes to Daniel. Daniel, kindly just, like I said, there are so many questions, but we have to streamline it. So the question goes as follows: with regards existing infrastructures for the shift towards renewable energy, how do you advise companies, especially in the developing countries, access financing for them to effectively execute? So with regards to the shift towards renewable energy infrastructure, how do you believe companies based in developing countries can better position themselves to access those financing opportunities? So please provide a response in, say, I know perhaps, right,
That's
if you're an
very,
investor.
very difficult question.
Yeah, very, very, and very technical as well. So would like to hear your response to that.
I have to give it a short moment to think. I think what you will have to focus on is on generating value as quickly as possible. So choose the overall cheapest solution. For example, Paul also said energy efficiency, and that's also what I say. It's one of the lowest hanging fruit, and it means you need to build less infrastructure, right? So if you can actually build the power generating renewable, I mean the solar or the wind or even the bio or the hydro power generating, right? And then use the existing infrastructure, the cables which you already do have in the ground, instead of enforcing these cables and then shifting it to when the power is actually generated. So you need to look at the overall system and see how can we look for the shortest return on investment path. And that should then lead to added investment. That is, but it's a very difficult question.
Of course, that's why we have you all here, to provide insights to our, complex questions we may have, and, to demystify some predisposed myths as well. So thank you for that response. So for many of you that have been asking, how can you get access to the slides and, other documents being used for this webinar, I just dropped a link on the chat box. Kindly go through that link, and then, on finalizing your registration through that link, will provide access to all the materials from, this webinar, as well as you also have exclusive access to our other webinars as well, and other add-on. And thank you so much, our speakers, for making our time to join this webinar. We have come to the end, and I'm quite sure we are so thrilled, to get insights from, a policy expert, get insights also from, a climate energy expert, get insights also from a thought leader in the space. I'm not quite sure of yourself, but myself, there are so many questions that I believe are already answered. And just like I mentioned earlier, we are about to wrap this up in, say, 2 minutes. This webinar is a precursor to our entire program. And then we're going to be having a series of these webinars. We're going to be also availing you with, various speakers as well in this entire space. But of course, like I mentioned, it aligns with our overall Powering Nigerians Green Future. And on the interim, we're going to be hosting a global event sometime in July, where we're going to be featuring exclusive panel sessions. also going to be featuring networking sessions as well. And also a critical component is our deal rooms, where we are going to be having, just like Daniel correctly mentioned, where, for charging stations, right? It's actually a major starting point. So we're going to be having companies, investors that are also interested in, mitigating and, level the playing field with regards to renewable energy infrastructure. They're going to be coming for that event. And then we're also going to be looking forward to having, businesses that have innovative solutions and can lead Nigeria's journey to, and Africa's journey in general, to net zero. So I would also paste a link to that, so you can rightly just access further information on that. And at this juncture, I would like to thank everyone. In the absence of further questions or further comments, Daniel, thank you so much for making our time for the call. Andres, thank you so much as well. Paul and my other team members as well that are also on the call. And thank you so much for the entire Welcome to Africa team for coordinating this. And we look forward to subsequent webinars, and do have a wonderful weekend ahead. And let's not forget, let's go green. Don't throw waste on the floor. If you are using a diesel engine, consider getting a Tesla. And if you are looking for how to get perhaps financing for that, you can come reach out to us. We'll help you understand better. Thank you so much, everyone, for that, and do enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Be
Bye
safe.
bye.